So, to summarise some criticisms of Sunak's self-employed bailout. Number one, everyone who's on the scheme, everyone who's eligible for the scheme, will have to wait until June. And many people feel this is completely unfair when employees will be paid in April. That's the first main criticism. It could put millions of low-income self-employed people like cleaners, taxi drivers, delivery drivers and so forth massively into the red, having to use universal credit, which is very small, and having to use credit cards, etc. to pay the bills in the meantime. That is not acceptable. There's no excuse when other countries are able to make urgent payments and grants. The payments from HMRC should be done in the next few weeks, not until June. That is unacceptable when other countries are able to do it. The next criticism is that it will exclude millions of people, nearly 2 million people, which is over a third of self-employed workers in Britain, because under the self-employed bailout, they are only eligible if they've earned over half their income in a self-employed capacity. But this is unfair. It's unfair because we should be ensuring 80% of income, wherever it's come from, whether it's come from a self-employed capacity or an employed capacity. If the individual, say, there will be many people that earn, say, 10 grand a year or 15 grand a year in an employed capacity, and they also work part-time and earn, say, 5 grand a year or 10 grand a year maybe, or whatever, in a self-employed capacity. But under this system, unless you've earned that self-employed income over half of what you have earned for the year, then you cannot claim on the self-employed scheme. Now, so that will mean many people that top up their salaries with additional income from in a self-employed capacity will not be able to claim on that income, and that is unfair. We should be insuring people based upon 80% of their salary, whether it's come from self-employed or employed. We shouldn't just be excluding all the people that earn a little bit extra in a self-employed capacity because they didn't earn over half their income in self-employed. Secondly, there are over 400,000 people that operate personal service companies. Now, for those people that don't know what that is, essentially, a self-employed person sets up, like a cleaner, let's take the example of a cleaner, they set up a limited company. The business that would typically have employed them now, instead of having to pay national insurance, sick pay, holiday pay, etc., doesn't have to take the employee on as a salaried worker, but simply pays them as if they're paying a limited company. The person who operates as the personal service company is typically the sole worker and so the sole director, and they will be able to reduce their tax bill as well because they will be able to pay dividends and maybe a very small salary so that they can avoid their typical tax requirements. So it is, as far as I'm aware, a tax avoidance mechanism. But ultimately, many of these people who operate as these companies are doing so because they can't be employed as a cleaner or as it is unless they're forced to set up this kind of tax structure. And so under this scheme, SUNAK'S says that the dividend payments will not be insured. Well, hundreds of thousands of people will be paying themselves the majority of their earnings as dividends through these companies, and they will not get any insurance. They will not be given any grants. And that, again, is, in my view, unfair, even if it is true that this system has been set up to, in many ways, avoid tax. Also, it excludes people from the scheme who've had a trading profit of over 50 grand a year. Now, that might seem like a lot of money, but ultimately, if you were an entrepreneur or a small business and you've recently invested in new software or new equipment, and you don't have much money left over, you will be excluded from this scheme because technically you had a trading profit of above 50 grand. Now, that also doesn't seem fair. So his bailout of the self-employed needs to be revised. It needs to cover these people. They should also be insured like workers, like employed workers, and they should be given payments much quicker than June. Universal credit claims that have skyrocketed. I think 500,000 people have put a claim in the past week. That 400 quid a month is pittance and will not be covering their typical standard cost of living.